Wednesday, July 3rd. Almost a week has gone by now, and no one has called about my advertisement about agony. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that no one ever will. I sold another dozen earthworms today, and we rigged up a trap to catch the white rabbit. We haven't had a chance to try it out yet, but I think it'll work. I found a roll of fine mesh wire about 75 feet long. We put this in a big semicircle around the lilac bush where the rabbit often sits. We left a big, wide opening toward the trees, and we scattered some rabbit food beside the lilac bush. Maybe the rabbit will hop in, and we'll catch him there and block the opening. If he doesn't do that, maybe we can drive him in. Before we set up the fence, Agony saw the rabbit and took out after him. The rabbit went down a hole back in the woods. Agony started digging, but it looked to me like the hole went back a long way underneath the roots of a big cottonwood. However, Agony wanted to dig, so we left him there. About an hour later, we decided to go back and see how he was doing. We found the hole, but Agony wasn't there any longer. We were near the edge of the back part of Mr. Apple's place, so we went over to the hedge to peek through. We were quite a distance from the road, and when we got to the hedge, we were opposite a big square back lawn that Midge had mentioned. There was a tall hedge on all four sides, and the whole area was nothing but grass. A whole lot of stakes had been driven here and there for no reason at all that I could see. And right in the center of the lawn there was a string tied around 4 stakes, encircling a plot about 25 wide and 40 feet long. In the center of this was Agony digging a deep hole. "Boy, will Apple blow his top when he sees that," Midge said. "You better call him out of there." I called and whistled, but Agony didn't pay any attention. I couldn't call too loud because I was afraid Apple might be somewhere around and would hear me. I might as just well have shouted at the top of my voice, though, because a minute later he came through the opening of the hedge from the front part of the lot and saw Agony. I've never seen a man so mad. His face got red, and he jumped up and down and shouted and screamed. He looked around for something to throw, but his lawn was so neat there wasn't a thing. Finally, he took off his hat and threw it on the ground. Then he disappeared through the hedge again and was gone about a minute. When he came back, he was running and carrying a pitchfork. "Get off my grass, you filthy hound!" he screamed. "Here, Agony!" I called. I don't know whether Apple heard me or not, but I didn't care. Agony stopped digging. I don't think he heard me, but he did hear Mr. Apple. He looked up, sort of curious-like, his nose all covered with fresh dirt, with his head cocked to one side. He stood watching Mr. Apple. He didn't seem frightened at all. Apple was in such a rage that I doubt if he even saw the string that was stretched around the stakes. It was a heavy cord and must have been quite strong, and the stakes must have been driven in a bit deep. He tripped over it and went head over heels, landing flat on his face. The pitchfork went flying through the air. Agony decided that he'd seen enough, and he went kiting toward the woods. He disappeared through the hedge up near the corner toward the big lawn. Midge and I decided that we would be smart if we got out of there too. By the time we got back to the barn, Agony was lying down on the old burlap bag just outside the door where he usually sleeps. He opened one eye and looked at us sort of lazy-like. "What do you suppose Agony was trying to dig up?" Midge asked. "I think he was just digging for the fun of it." "No, he wasn't," Midge said. "He's got a real sharp nose. He smells something buried there." "A bone," I said. "Maybe lots of bones. Maybe a body." "Don't be silly," I told her. It's against zoning laws to bury bodies except in the cemetery, and Mr. Apple believes in obeying the law." I thought it was a pretty funny remark, but Midge said, "You're a riot," and made a sour face. She persuaded me we ought to go back and see what Apple was doing. By the time we got there and had found a good spot where we could look through the hedge, Mr. Apple had pretty well filled up the hole that Agony had made. He packed the dirt down and very carefully scratched the surface. Then he disappeared for a few minutes and came back with a small bag and sprinkled what I suppose was grass seed on the bare spot. Then he roughed up the surface a little bit and patted it down again, doing all that work on his knees and very, very carefully. When he finished, he connected up a hose and sprinkled the whole patch with water. After finishing his work with the bare spot, he was very careful not to step on the lawn enclosed by the cord. Instead, he circled around and around, making certain that every bit of the area was well sprinkled. "Now what do you think?" Midge asked. "Isn't there something mysterious about the way he acts?" "There's something mysterious about it," I said, "but I think the answer is that he's just a lunatic."